Welcome to the Florandorder Time Chat. My guest today is Toya Ricci. Toya Ricci is a sex therapist and sexuality educator who passionately believes in embracing, nurturing, and creatively expressing sexuality as a fundamental component of overall health and well-being. Today, we're going to be exploring how time, energy, and the practice of intimacy intersect and influence each other. I'm so excited about this topic, and welcome, Toya. So, hi, Toya.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here and to be talking about these things that mean so much to me and that I talk about all the time with my clients.
Yes, tell us a bit about how you started your practice.
I'm in year 4 of my practice, and I wanted to find a way, after being in the creative industry for 15 years, I wanted to make people beautiful rather than things beautiful. And I've always been passionate about sex, and in particular, the intersection of sex and history and culture. And I found myself being a sex therapist now.
Amazing, amazing. And so we've started talking about how time really has a part to play in a continuing sex life. And I suppose that's where we're going to be kicking off about. Let's talk about that. So creating time for an ongoing sex life.
Yes, I find it really interesting how in modern time has become a commodity in itself. It's a resource, and we're expected to do so much in such little time. When I think back to being a kid, I was like, what did my mother do all day? Like, it seems like it was like a luxury because there was so much less that it seemed like she had to do. And it's in some ways, I feel like we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. Like we have to not only cook dinner, but we have to cook an amazing dinner. It has to be healthy. We have to have a relationship, and it has to be like, you have to have quality time together. And if you have kids, they take up so much time, but not just time. There's energy as well. So even if you have time, you may not necessarily have energy. If you have energy, you may not have time. So really, there's a lot of things that need to be kept in balance.
Definitely. I was just talking to someone the other day who was saying there's just so much to keep track of these days, and how it does feel different at the moment to previous generations or whatnot. And it is just that influx of information on top of maintaining humanity. Do you see that a lot in your sessions, like how technology has, and that influx of information has distracted people from intimacy?
Absolutely. In some ways, it makes it easier for us to do work because we can work from home, or we can work at different hours, or you can log in and catch up on things that you can't do in the office. But that also means that it's encroaching into your home space as well, all of the work aspects. And so I feel like there's always been parts of our identity attached to work, but now it's like you can't just leave it. You can't set it down. It's becoming increasingly difficult to do so.
Definitely. And talking about the myth of spontaneity, it reminds me of something I say to my clients a lot around, like, there is no spare time. Like, people are waiting for spare time, or I'll do that when I have spare time, or I'll do that when I feel like it, or whatnot. And so using tools that they use in their work life in order to get like life admin done, and even just personal things like life projects, life hobbies, relaxation, putting in times for like having a moment to yourself, and using your calendar as a support to make that happen. Tell us about how you see that happening in your clinic, the myth of spontaneity.
Yes. I have a lot of couples who tell me that they don't want to schedule in sex or intimacy time because it doesn't feel spontaneous. And look, and I get that. You want to feel like someone's been thinking about you. You want to feel like the moment is rich, and that, like, I guess the way that movies or books tell us it should be like you're swept up in the moment and there's nothing else to do but, have sex. But in reality, I feel like what you're getting in those spontaneous moments is presence. And suddenly everything is aligned and you're fully present with each other. And that feels really exciting when someone is seeing, hearing, and understanding you. And so what I'm saying is that you can actually create those moments and planned sexy time, or I call them intimacy sessions. It doesn't have to be something that is like where you run the same script the whole time. That's the boring part. But like when I was a graphic designer, it was great if you were given like carte blanche to do whatever you wanted and you had a blank canvas. But actually, that's so much pressure and so much intensity. Sometimes when they're just like, here are your guidelines, but you can be as free as you want within those guidelines, you're like, yes. And then suddenly so much more creativity is able to come out and you can be inspired. So what I would say is that you have this time that you set aside, but you can do whatever you want in that time. It doesn't have to be the same sexual script that you play out. And often I recommend having a spectrum of activities. So from the least amount of time and energy all the way up to, I don't know, like holiday away in Paris type sex and experience. So really, like the only thing that's making it boring is you. Like I tell my kids, nothing is boring. There's only boring people. So you can take that time and be as creative as you like within the time.
Yes. And two things there, presence, like that is so true. So I hear from a lot of creatives pushback on scheduling even some of their work stuff because they're afraid it'll kill the creativity. And then my counter argument is, well, actually it frees up your brain from having to hold on to all that unnecessary stuff that we can use other tools to help us with, giving you the freedom to be creative and to actually be present. So I love that works in with intimacy as well. And that boring script, like it doesn't have to be, just because you've got some time allocated doesn't mean that there is an agenda attached to your intimacy space.
Absolutely. And if I can add into that, it's great that you mentioned creatives because, again, that's my background. And when I was in that space, I spent so much time looking at how really famous artists, their processes and how they inspired inspiration. But a lot of times the key component to that is practice. And so this is what I tell clients as well. Like you have to be in a practice of intimacy. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Like dancers don't just go out and just dance their routine. When you go to the gym, it's best to like have a warm up and a cool down. So in the same way, you can be more inspired. You can once some elements are taken off the table and you don't have to worry about it because you are in the practice, then it's much easier to drop into intimacy and create moments that feel spontaneous and where you're present and they feel a little bit magical. I think practice is a key component to that as well.
Yeah. So it's so suggesting just to practice that. So I'm thinking, so there's the people who, and I suppose females, like having more of a build up is often, well, in my case, it's sexier to have that build up and have something that we're looking forward to. Whereas my partner, being a male, bit of resistance maybe around that. And so it's practice that would help that, to make that easier. And that's what you're mentioning to clients.
Absolutely. And what I love about what you said there is that it involves a bit of awareness of what you want. So that's a key part of it, is knowing exactly what you want. So, well, not even exactly, but maybe just having categories of things that you want so that you know what to ask for. And really the only way you're going to get that is through practice. And that's why I say, again, that's when the spectrum comes up, because it would be really easy to be resistant to or avoidant to your intimacy session if you were like, oh, I don't want to do this. But if you know that you can go in and communicate, actually, I don't feel like doing this, but I'm happy to do this, then suddenly it means that you can go. And that's what I mean, is that once you're in the practice of doing it regularly, then it becomes easier to communicate, it becomes less awkward, it becomes more enjoyable, and you can actually have different reasons for doing it. Sometimes it can be about fun, sometimes it can be about rest and relaxation. I mean, think about like how powerful is that? You can have sex that is restful and nurturing, you know, or it can be energetic and athletic. You know, whatever you feel like in the moment, that's what you can ask for, and then negotiate with your partner about.
Yeah. And that leads us to maybe what are some tips and tricks to communicate about like what it is that you're wanting, that you could impart.
Yes, this part is much harder to like I can say it's easy. Like the really boring thing about sex is that 80% of what makes sex good is communication. But there's lots of reasons culturally, individually, why we don't want to, why it's not easy to talk about sex. So I guess the first part would be what I often suggest is that people do a bit of individual exploration on their own and figure out, you know, how they feel pleasure in their body, you know, what things they might want from their partner. So I often suggest that each of the partners go away and individually make lists of all the things that they're willing to do sexually that are open and enthusiastic yeses. And then they bring them back to each other and to discuss them, like what things surprise them, what things are they not surprised about, like what things do they wish were on the list, you know. And what that does is it gets people started just talking about sex. There's also some sexuality conversation starters. There's lots of them out there on the internet, and I suggest that's a way that people to just have conversations, just start any way they can. And sometimes when it's outside of the bedroom and it's more of a general topic that you're talking about, it becomes easier to discuss it.
I love what you said at the beginning there. I might misquote you. That 80% of, what was it? 80% of sex is boring because it's communication.
The really boring thing is
Yeah.
that kind of good sex is communication.
Yeah. And I think I think that's like a life lesson for life, isn't it? That there's many boring things to the good stuff. Like boring stuff often leads to really good things.
Yes, but also the conversation doesn't have to be boring. For some reason, though, what I find in my practice is that people are like, "Oh, just tell me how to squirt," or "Just tell us what positions we can do," or whatever. And I'm just like, "I'm sorry." Like those things, like they're great, you know, they can help with technique, but those are more refinement things. The best way that you can have sex is through communication. And I don't know, and it would be interesting if people would just like think back to the times when sex felt like the most amazing, if they felt like there was some sort of communication, and sometimes it can be unspoken, but that was really present between them and their partner.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, really good. Yeah. And so I suppose that leads us into thinking about intimacy through the lifespan and also almost the relationship span, if you will, because even thinking about scheduling a time for intimacy, I've heard of many people who have like a sexy Sunday. They know it's happening at some stage on a Sunday. Any kind of sex, any kind of intimacy is happening on the Sunday, and it kind of just keeps that ticking along within their busy lives and towards like, you know, having had a long relationship. So what do you see or what would you like to share about that, the intimacy through the lifespan and relationship span? Maybe it's two different questions, but
It is, but this is why the practice is a good thing, because that means that you can have sex throughout your lifespan. And you know, when it comes to scheduling, what I find is that there could be two types of people. There's those who it makes them more anxious, the idea that it's scheduled in, and then those who it like takes the weight of them off. It takes the weight of expectation off of them. So what I typically suggest is that, like it can be just a day and you decide on the day what happens. Or it can be just a chunk of time that you know is manageable and that you won't fail out. So it can be 15 minutes, it can be half an hour. You know, I'm not saying that it has to be like a full day long session. The other part of it is that is, again, like I say, the practice and knowing that you can ask for what you want when you go to it. So that's another key part of sex throughout the lifespan. Other factors to include is environment. So what do you need? What kind of, what I suggest is get used to using pillows and cushions. Because, you know, that will be helpful later on. Get used to using lube, and you know, you can discuss outside of the bedroom, like, okay, do you need to have a shower beforehand? Do you need to do this beforehand? And then you just kind of do those things separate. So it's not like the partner, you're saying, oh, we can't start until I have a shower. If you have the time scheduled, you can shower, do your prep, do your drop-in, anything that you need to get ready for the moment prior to the session, so that you show up completely ready and the partner doesn't have to feel like their energy has been taken away because they're waiting for your energy, you know? So that's some of the other benefits of spontaneity. The other thing is that if your partner has asked for things like words of affirmation or like gifts or gestures or things like that, and you're terrible at reminding them, you can set reminders for yourself on your phone. Your partner doesn't have to know about them, or they can know that you do it, but they don't know when you're going to do it, you know? And I think that that's a good way to outsource part of your memory, and it will still seem completely spontaneous to them, and it just helps you remember. So all of this technology, all of these things, I think is about being kind to yourself and meeting yourself where you're at. And that's one way to continue to maintain good intimacy throughout the lifespan.
That's really lovely. Yeah. And it reminds me, you know, someone will mention their birthday and I'll pop it in my phone and I look like the greatest of friends because, you know, I'll send them a message, or, you know, just if they've got something coming up, I'll add it to my phone, and people are often surprised. And you're right, you can use technology to help you to keep those connections going, and they're none the wiser. And yeah, at first I did feel a little bad, like, but yeah, then you just realize it's just helping you and getting it out of your memory so it can do other things.
Exactly. And we have so much information that is flooding our brains at the moment. So just having this ways to be able to remember is, I think, extremely helpful.
And I wanted to ask a question, going back to the different stages of life. So how does intimacy evolve over those different stages? And what are some of the key considerations for maintaining it over time, including that practice, but if there are others?
Yeah, that's, I guess part of it is giving yourself permission to not feel like sex, not feel like it in the way that people think that sex needs to be. So a lot of times people think it needs to just be penetrative all the time, but really you can just have a nice massage with each other that includes touching genitals or doesn't include touching genitals, you know, and that actually releases all of the same hormones and like feel good sensations and bonding that the act of intercourse or penetration would have as well. So I think just giving yourself permission to be like, actually, my body doesn't feel like this. And I feel like it works in the same way for people with vulvas and people with penises, because sometimes, you know, erections aren't always going to be reliable, you know, and then the older you get, it's less the case. So if you have other options and things that you can do, it takes the pressure off. So, it is about reading your body. If you get used to reading your body and what it needs, then yeah, you're set up for the rest of your life. And so often I say, when you go into the intimacy session or you get ready to have sex, and again, people say this is not very spontaneous, but asking each other, what do you feel like now? What do you need in order to have a safe, pleasurable, and satisfying experience? Please notice that I say satisfying and that I'm not saying orgasm. So sometimes you can be completely satisfied and happy, and it doesn't mean that you need an orgasm. So that's a myth. You don't always have to be chasing that.
Yes. And I think movies probably have a lot to, and porn have a lot to, you know, say for that myth. it's always going to end in that, or that it's a kind of a fail if it doesn't.
Yes. And when you think about it, if you are not communicating anything else about your sexual experience, then the orgasm becomes the only form of communication that you have to know that your partner enjoyed it. You know? And but there, that's why I say it's really boring that communication is 80% of it. But it can be exciting. It can be hot to do the communication. It can, you know, build up the intellectual connection. It can build up the practical life connections. If you know that, I often talk about currency. So you're building up currency that you can spend in the bedroom. And a lot of it is the sexual tension that you can build in other ways.
Oh, say a bit more about that.
Yes. When you think about the things that lead to spontaneity, a lot of it is having shared common understandings, or almost like in jokes is the closest thing I can think of. And so when you build those up, it does create a sort of sexual intensity. So the more you can do that in everyday life, the more you can kind of just be playful and have fun with each other, or, you know, feel like you're in things together as a team, then that makes sex hotter.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah. I like what you had said earlier about, well, you know that this is the time for you, and so you can do all your preparations beforehand, and it helps you think ahead, to be prepared and be more proactive in that space, so that the spontaneity can take place in that intimacy hour.
Absolutely. And there's been some clients that I've spoken to, and look, I want to say that for some people, it does take a while for them to get in the mood and to get ready. And, you know, they need that kind of like, it's almost like, it's like they have to kind of flirt with themselves, and then they can flirt with other people. And I think it's gorgeous. There's nothing wrong with that. But I've had people tell me that, like, okay, in the process of seeing me get ready, then my partner starts to get excited because they know that I'm going through the preparations and that I'm getting. So in some ways, it kind of takes away that who's going to initiate. Say that's the other benefit of scheduling intimacy time, is that then no one has to initiate it, and it takes away all of that. So, and that's a big problem a lot of times with couples, and particularly if they have mismatched libidos. But what I always say is that you have the scheduled time. Anything else you do is bonus. I'm not saying that's the only time you can have sex, because that's the other resistance that people have, is like, oh, I don't want to just have sex once a week. And it's like, no, I'm not saying that. You can have sex whenever you want, but at least you know that this session is there. So I think the other times are like going to the gym. The scheduled time is time with the trainer.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like the who initiates, and I've been watching couples therapy on SBS and loving it. But a lot of the conversations come around like about rejection, and how much energy that drains from people. So the who initiates and rejection, and that whole interaction, that's just taking a whole lot of energy away. So we can use the scheduling and the kind of the time to help booster our energy, which is a nice interconnectedness.
Absolutely. And I think the rejection part is a good factor, because a lot of times it will build up and up and up in relationships, and it's often one person who's getting more rejected than the other person, and that can build up. Like you say, it takes away so much energy. And part of it is that when you think about sexual intimacy, think about how the mind, body, spirit, you know, sexual juju, all of that has to be aligned. And that's why I think people feel like, oh, it's spontaneous, like it just happens to me. But that's why, actually, no, you can figure out for yourself what you need to make it happen for you, to make it align. Don't let it just be something that mysteriously hits you. You can gather data and information about yourself and know what you like, so that you can ask for what you like, or prepare yourself for what you like.
Mm-hmm. And is this a very like to how long has sex therapy been around, is what I'm kind of thinking. Like, how long have we been discussing it in this kind of manner?
Well, I don't know. Well, the full history of sex therapy would probably be another episode for us.
Oh, goody.
But I can say the earliest recorded thing, I don't know, because like even the Greek philosophers were talking about it. So, and obviously this is from a Western perspective. And some of my other research, because I'm doing a PhD on decolonizing the history of sexual pleasure, there's lots of well, there's some recorded evidence from indigenous peoples around the world and how they dealt with sex and how they taught each other how to have sexual pleasure. What I love is one of the earliest stories that I've heard was from, I believe it was King Henry VIII. And they were unable to consummate their marriage, and they had to bring in a special advisor to teach them. I believe they showed them a certain position that they could use, and after that, they were able to successfully conceive.
Wow.
So I think it's always been there, but for whatever reason, well, there's lots of reasons, lots of cultural reasons, we just haven't spoken about it.
Yeah. I think it's such a empowering and exciting time that it is hopefully going to stay this way for going forward.
It is exciting and empowering, but I feel like it often means that it puts a lot of pressure on people. And so what we're finding now is that in particular, the younger generations are choosing not to have sex. When they do have sex within relationships, they're stopping sex sooner. And and some are just like saying, I just want to do my own thing, live my life, and not worry about sex at all.
Wow.
So the reasons why we come to it, I think that's what we have to figure out. And that's what the work I always start with, like, what are your motivations even to have sex? Because we live in a time where it's totally fine if you don't want to have sex. But if you do want to have sex, what do you want it to look like?
Fascinating. So you see a whole age range of clients.
Absolutely. What I love about sex therapy is that it's probably 50-50 men and women, 50-50 couples and individuals of all different genders, all different sexual orientations. It is incredibly diverse.
Amazing. Is there, well, we'll have to have you back when you've completed your PhD. That sounds incredible. Anything else you'd like to leave us with, or thinking about time, intimacy, and everything else that you bring to the table?
Well, I feel like in a lot of your work, like the themes is just balance across all the areas of your life, and actually sex and how you express sex is just one of those areas. It's all part of who you are. It's all part of what makes up a whole person. And like I said, that doesn't mean that it is about you having sex, but even if you decide not to have sex, that's a decision, and that's how you hold your sexuality. So I think that it just needs to be considered in proportion to the rest, every other element of your life. So when you want to feel more fit, you go to the gym. And in this case, you think about, what does sexual fitness mean to you? What does sexual creativity look like for you? And that's not just within relationships and partnered sex, but also individually, what it feels like for you.
Amazing. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.